for my
Hold on.
senior project.
Let me push a button. There you go. You can see me now. I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to be informal like that. Or
It's
formal rather.
okay. Yeah, I'm doing this for my senior project.
Excellent, excellent. Well, what can I do for you? What do you have in mind?
And before I, would it be okay if I record this
Of
meeting?
course it is. Of course it is. I want you to make sure you get everything correct and you can go back and reference it later. I think that's important.
Okay, thank you so much. So, what does the North American Bigfoot Center do?
Well, we do three main things, actually. The first thing that we do is, of course, we educate the public on what Sasquatches are, how they're just perfectly normal animals. They're kind of combat a lot of the misinformation that we get on television and the internet, essentially. Um,
Hmm.
the, they tend to sensationalize the subject so much and try to associate it with paranormal things and mind reading and UFOs and all that stuff. And frankly, Sasquatches are a lot more boring than that. They're just regular animals out in the woods doing their thing, you know? They're weird, I mean, because they're human-like in some ways,
Oh,
but they're just animals. They're mammals, right? So that's
yeah.
the first thing that we do. We educate the people that these things are just out there. They're part of the normal ecosystem, and they're actually real. And there's evidence for them. The second thing we do is that we are trying really hard to find and preserve historical research collections because Bigfoot research has been going on for a long time now, decades, and all the early Bigfoot researchers are dead, honestly. And the second generation of researchers are kind of slowly dying off. And I know Sasquatches are real animals. I've seen one, right? I know they're actually there. Therefore, discovery is going to happen someday. And so I think that this elongated discovery process that we're undergoing right now is interesting. And once Bigfoots are accepted to be real animals, all this pre-discovery history is going to be of interest and maybe even useful. So at the North American Bigfoot Center, we're trying to find these research collections and preserve them for the future before they get thrown away. Like if these people die, like what do their kids do with the stuff? Like, oh, weird Uncle Joe was into Bigfoot, like, they're just going to throw it away, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to stop that before it happens. And then the third thing that we do here, I know it's a long answer, but you asked. It's not my problem, it's yours. Um,
I
and
don't
the
mind.
yeah, the third thing that we do here is that we use incoming information from the public to drive our own field research. We are out there trying to gather information and evidence about these animals. And so we're using the public who might see one of these things while they're camping, or maybe they saw one 2 years ago in a certain area, or something like that. And we're trying to use that incoming information to learn more about the animals.
Hmm, that's pretty cool.
I like it. It's a good job.
Yeah. Okay. What is the most compelling evidence you've seen?
The most compelling evidence about Sasquatch that I've seen, a lot of people, I get that question a lot. It makes sense. It's a good question. A lot of people think that it's going to be like the Patterson Gimlin film or the Freeman footage or some certain footprint cast. And it really isn't. It's actually, you know what it's like when people say, "What's the best evidence?" That's like somebody asking me,
Hmm.
which of these jigsaw piece puzzles is the best? And it's not about the individual piece, it's about how it all fits together to make a larger picture.
Hmm.
So let's take, for example, the footprint cast evidence, which is very, very compelling for Sasquatches. It turns out that Sasquatch's footprint, it kind of looks like a human print, just bigger, but actually it's very, very different. The proportions are very different. The toes are longer in proportion to the length. The metatarsals, which is like the section here, I'll take my shoe off real fast. Like the toes are like up here, right? The
Hmm.
metatarsals are in between the toes and where the ankle would be. Those are actually shorter on a Sasquatch than they are on a human. And then, of course, the heel segment is longer because of that same thing. Well, we know that because of the footprint evidence. We can see the effects of that different anatomy in the way that the footprints are shaped. right? Because the feet interact with the ground differently than they would with a human. And there's a flexibility in the mid part of the foot. Now, this is interesting, of course, because that's true of all ape species. Except for human beings. Human beings, I always talk biologically, and human beings, our family, we're in the ape family. You know, it's not a derogatory term. It's not an insult in any way. It's biological. We are a very weird species of ape at the end of the day. And so I always talk biologically. So I want to get that out of the way first. I'm not insulting anybody. I'm an ape too, right? Um, but humans are our feet are very different because we evolved differently. We evolved for long distance running. But anyway, their feet are very, very flexible. And we can see that in the footprint cast evidence. But we can also see that in the Patterson Gimlin film. We can actually see that animal's foot flexing at the same spot that the footprints tell us it should be flexing and does in fact flex. So that's what I mean about it's not one piece of evidence. It's about how all the pieces of evidence kind of paint a larger picture, just like a bunch of different pieces of a puzzle do the same thing. So that to me, that's very compelling. It's not just one cast or one film or one this or one that. It's about how everything paints a very cohesive picture of a naturally occurring animal.
That's pretty good.
Thanks.
So, why do people believe in or not believe in Bigfoot?
Well, it's because so far the academics and the authorities that we turn to haven't accepted their existence, and a lot of it is kind of because there was the word Bigfoot was coined in 1958, right? Sasquatch was coined in the 1920s, but the word Bigfoot came to America in 1958. And in the 1960s and 1970s, there were some documentaries about it. And all the anthropologists at the time say, oh, no, no, these things aren't real. We would know about them by now. Or these things aren't real because that's not the way that evolution works. And it turns out that they were incorrect. We've changed our idea of what human evolution really looks like. And in the 1980s and 1990s, oh, yes, let me back up. At the time, they thought that evolution was a linear progression, like of one thing changed slowly into another. And then that new thing was just better at being alive, better at doing everything than the old one and drove it extinct. Like Neanderthals were here, and then Homo sapiens showed up and were just smarter and better. And then it made it so the Neanderthals went extinct. That's not the way that it works at all. Now we know that many different species of our genus, of our family, lived at the same time and same places, right? And we only started learning about that in the late 1980s, early 1990s. So back in the old days, Bigfoot wasn't real because it couldn't be real because it didn't fit our scientific model. But nowadays it does fit into the scientific model. So nowadays, because Bigfoot has been treated like such a joke for so long, because it didn't make sense scientifically until pretty recently, that I think those echoes, like that sort of idea, still persists until the present day. And then also you have to look at how the media treats the subject as well. I mean, I was on the news this past week up here in Portland on Coin News, KOIN. And even then, they made a joke at. I mean, they weren't making fun of me, but they were making fun of Bigfoot. They had somebody in a suit. They were laughing about it and all that sort of stuff. So, which is odd to do because you don't do that about elk or bears. You know, I think it's weird. But they do that because well, a lot of people don't think it's real, and it's kind of a funny subject. It's kind of weird. And also, when you look at the way that the TV treats it as a joke, you hear about the hoaxes, you hear about the ridiculous claims like Bigfoot's right on UFOs or something like that, and they just don't treat it like a wildlife biologist would treat it. And because of that, people make fun of it, and nobody wants to believe in something people make fun of, right? Yeah, people don't want to be made fun of, so they just pretend the whole thing's a joke. But it's not. They're actually there.
Yeah. Um, what should someone do if they think they've seen a Bigfoot?
Well, first of all, treasure the experience. I think that's the most important thing to do. But really, it's kind of like seeing a bear in a way. You just saw something perfectly natural in the woods. It's just much more rare. What I would prefer is that if somebody sees a Sasquatch, I'd like to know about it. They should call the North American Bigfoot Center and let us know where it happened and when it happened. And if it was recent, like in the last week or something, I would go down and look around for footprints or something like that to see if I can gather some sort of evidence and learn more about the animals. But really, at the end of the day, it's kind of like seeing another kind of wildlife. There's not really much to do. I'm not sure there's any, you should do this. I think that there are options. Maybe you want to share it with somebody. Maybe you don't want to share it with somebody because other people tend to be mean and bullies and they might make fun of you. We all experience that. I think who knows? I mean, but it's a treasured experience, and I think that you should. I would personally, I would write down everything I can remember about it to make sure that I don't forget as I get older. You know?
Like any like safety issues or anything like that, like precautions.
Yeah, is there any safety precautions or even you be should be maybe you won't be worried about if you
Oh,
encounter a
oh.
Bigfoot?
Well, Sasquatches, they're certainly potentially dangerous because they're large, wild animals. Very fast, very strong, and all that sort of stuff. But they're not out to get us or anything like that. They're not monsters in that true sense. But really, no animal is. I mean, elk are very, very dangerous too because they're large, wild animals, or bears. But really, bears aren't even out to get us either. They want to be left alone like everything else. So, Sasquatch is, and as evidence for that, by the way, I would say that if Bigfoots were out to get us, there'd be very few of us left, in my opinion. You know,
Yeah.
so I don't. I mean, that's my evidence for it. And 99.9%, like a lot, almost every single sighting, when they are seen, they simply walk away. It's not a big deal. Sometimes they try to scare you. Sometimes they'll make some noise or scream or something like that. Maybe throw something, but they don't really hurt us. Then again, we don't hear from the people who didn't survive. So I don't know. But again, they are large, wild animals that should be given the same respect that you would give elk or moose or something like that.
That's good advice.
Thank you.
Any personal experience or favorite stories?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've been doing this for 31 years. I'm an old man. I've devoted my life to this. I've been around them many times. I've seen one, maybe two of these things over the years. I saw one through a thermal imager in North Carolina back in 2011. I've had rocks thrown at me. I've been screamed at from close range. I find Sasquatch footprints in my research areas on a pretty regular basis, about half the time, maybe a little less than half the time. Um, yeah, I mean, I've been around these things kind of a lot. I've been scared by them a few times. They pulled some trees down when I was standing pretty close on the other side of a big thicket of trees. They literally pulled a tree down at me. Yeah, and of course, I did this professionally too for a long time for that show on Animal Planet. I hosted that for a long time, so I traveled the world looking for Bigfoot stuff or other sort of hominins like that. So there's just too many specific stories to even think about sharing. Yeah, kind of a lot of stuff, man. But
Makes sense.
yeah, but my favorite things about the Bigfoot subject and going and looking for them is just going to the woods. I think that because at the end of the day, Bigfooting is kind of just going to the woods with something else on your mind. I think that that is in itself valuable. Going to the woods and walking on trails and spending time with friends out there in wild places is the benefit of doing this because most of the time Bigfoots aren't there. They're very, very rare animals and they're hard to get close to and all that stuff. But you don't have to have a Bigfoot near you to have a good time in the woods.
That's true. What made you switch from teaching to running the North American Bigfoot Center?
Well, I was teaching for a long time. I was a fifth grade teacher for about 14 years in the classroom there. And at some point I got a call from Animal Planet and they invited me to be on their show. And so I was one of the hosts of that show for 9 years of my life. And then during that time, my teaching credential expired because you have to have like a license to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I figured, well, I could go back into the classroom, but I'd have to go get my master's degree and spend a bunch of money and all this other stuff. But I also realized, well, I'm already, doing the Bigfoot thing. Why don't I just kind of open a museum about it? Because there's no Bigfoot museum in Oregon or Washington for that matter. And
Yeah.
it seemed to me that there should be. So I did, basically, is at the end of the day. It just seemed like a logical next step for me. And I couldn't be happier about it, of course, because not only do I get to, spend my time focusing on something that I'm really passionate about, but it also brings me in contact with fresh information and fresh evidence, and it gets me to the woods a lot. I think that's good for me. Yeah, it's just a great job to have, and hopefully, I'm doing something good for the animals as well, not just me. I mean, I'm not a wealthy guy. I know he's on TV, but there's no money in TV, and the museum doesn't make a lot of money, but my bills are paid. Because here's something that's one of the camera guys, one of my friends who ran the cameras, on Finding Bigfoot on the TV show, told me once, um, and I live by this. He said you can only make two amounts of money, enough or not enough, and I make enough, which is great because apparently there's a bunch of billionaires out there who don't make enough money, but I make enough, you know.
That makes sense.
I was gonna say, ask him about like, did you feel like his experience teaching correlates with the Bigfoot Research Center? Hi, I'm an EA over here. I don't know if you can hear me.
I see
I'm on
part of
the
your
side
hair.
here.
Oh, there
Um,
you are. How you doing?
your experience of teaching, you think, helped correlate with running the Bigfoot Center? So,
Oh
like,
yeah,
the
yeah.
fact that you taught so long in classrooms, you extrapolated that experience into running the Bigfoot Center and educating people about Bigfoot and research.
Of course, yeah, of course. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a scientist. I'm a science communicator, essentially. I'm passionate about a certain branch of science, and I try to communicate that passion and that excitement about this subject to the public. And I taught 10-year-olds for a living. I taught fifth graders, basically. And at the end of the day, most people are 10 years old at heart,
Yeah.
essentially. And unfortunately, in our society, most people read at about a 10 or 12th grade level. So I'm really well positioned to communicate this nuanced, subtle science to the general public, you know. So I'm a pretty decent communicator, and there's people who know a lot more about Bigfoot than me, but at the same time, I think people, and maybe you guys even now, can see that I care about the subject and I'm passionate about the subject, and it excites me. I enjoy this, and I think um, that's the key to being a good educator as well. Because being a student, Elmer, you know that if you can tell that if your teacher's bored, you don't care about the subject, but a good teacher
I'm not the
can
passionate one
infuse the
about
lesson with
boring
their
stuff.
enthusiasm and get excited about the most boring thing and make that boring thing really exciting. And that's what I bring to the subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, boring teacher's the worst. You got to have a teacher who loves what they do and are just like are oozing with excitement, and then that makes students excited